Hello, this is Cynthia Baiqing from Evergreen Campus LLC. I'm going to present violence against women and reentry. First of all, I'd like to give you an overview, and this is also the objective. There are two parts of the overview. The first one is about a comparison between offenders who re-enter the community as offenders who committed gender-based crime, and versus those who have committed crimes against women. And the second part is the relationship victimhood and reentry. Okay, so the first part, I use interviews with 31 respondents, and it seems that gender-based crimes such as sexual and physical assault of women and girls are prevalent in the U.S. And seems that rural communities are more friendly, or urban communities are more punitive towards offenders who committed gender-based violence against women. And but in rural areas, the younger generation is more punitive towards offenders who committed gender-based violence. For the male perpetrators of non-gender-based crimes against women and girls, or girls such as theft, rural communities are more punitive. So that really shows that in rural communities, women probably are not treated even as property, as important as property. For women of color who committed crimes other than sexual physical assaults, usually when women commit such crimes, it's against minors. Urban areas, for those who committed non-gender-based, non-minor-based crimes, women of color, urban areas seem to be more punitive. So that really confirms the theme that minority women are not perceived as capable. The re-entry process in both urban and rural areas is also impacted by, associated with victimhood of violence or the larger society, particularly women's victimhood. So for this part, I use the interviews as well as survey responses from about 600 participants. So I have two victim identities. The first one is victim of a crime. The second is victim of the larger society. It seems that from the interviews, respondents show that trauma-related victimization often render these individuals to decide to commit crime, such as drug use, right, trespassing, things like that. And the findings in general show that the two identities, the salience of the two identities is very low. Salience is the likelihood a person is going to enact this identity. So the low salience of the two identities, victim identities, really shows that there's a certain amount of stigma associated with that. Additionally, some network characteristics of these respondents explain the identity salience well. There are two research questions in this study. The first one is, how is gender role related with the re-entry process of gender-based violence offenders and non-gender-based violence offenders? The second one is, how do stigma and trauma interact to impact the re-entry process? A related question is, what is the relationship between victimhood and re-entry? So there are several, pieces of literature associated with this work. Previous studies on the offenders of gender-based violence usually examine these individuals' experience within prison, and because of the high recidivism rate, such studies also show that the homelessness rate for this population is very high. often around 89-90%. And regarding the reentry process related with space, urban versus rural, Ward and colleagues show that the rural areas are more punitive. Feminist criminology literature is large and rich, with analysis on the relationship between perpetration and victimization, and thus reentry. For this work, I apply a theory of identity network. An identity network perspective is interactionist in nature. Basically, how it shows that people's perceptions of themselves would interact with those around them, because our perceptions of selves also have behavioral consequence. So it is important to study people's network and identity. For the hypothesis, I have 6. The first 3 is related with the identity of victim of a crime, and the last 3 are related with the identity of victim of the larger society. So for each, there are 3. For each identity, for each of the 2 identities, there are 3 network characteristics associated with the resilience of the 2 identities. The first is the network size. Network size is the number of people in a person's social network. And the second is the ego-alter relationship. Ego refers to respondents, alter refers to the respondents' acquaintances. And the third is the pro-social attitude of respondents. So the larger the social network size is, the closer relationship between the respondent and his associates is, the more pro-social the respondent is, the less resilient the identity of a victim of crime is. Very similarly, the larger the social network size is, the closer relationship between the respondent and his or her associates is, the more pro-social the respondent is, the less resilient his or her identity of a victim of the larger society is. And I use a mixed methods, so I have interviews and surveys, and I recruited interviewees through a private correction community, as well as professional associations and agencies working for the criminal justice system, such as drug courts. Survey participants were recruited through MTurk, which is a platform of Amazon to match employers and employees. And when I analyzed the data, I followed a method of identity network, which is to see the covariation of people's identities and networks. The results, I'm going to present the results based on the 2 research questions I have. So the first part is the reentry of gender-based violence offenders and non-gender-based violence offenders. So it seems that, rural areas are more punitive towards property, non-gender-based offenses rather than gender-based offenses. So let's see. There are 3 white male perpetrators in urban areas: Henry Baker, Jackson Clinton, and Walter Jensen. Let's see how they fare in the reentry process. So Henry Baker was imprisoned for 17 years because he was accused of assaulting his ex-wife sexually. And then after he was released, he remarried, and he has a neighbor who is his friend. And then he also has his mother and stepfather in his life. But that's pretty much all he has in his network. So when he asked about his feeling during incarceration, he says he was scared, paranoid, and after he was released, it took some time for him to assume his husband's role, because he was not used to being around people. So in his case, social sanction is showed in social isolation. Jackson Clinton was convicted of child molestation. So he was successful with desistance because he was very, repentful. He was very receptive to the larger society. And that allows him to have a very large network. But he was underemployed. He has a PhD in mathematical engineering, but his job was mostly cleaning toilets. So as you can see, from these two cases of urban respondents, both are white males, white men, there's social sanction shown either in social isolation or underemployment. In rural areas, offenders who committed gender-based violence fare better, but younger generation are more punitive towards these offenders of gender-based violence against women and girls. There are three white male perpetrators in rural areas: Kathy Blacksmith's ex-partner, Lauren Williams' uncle, and Luke Bell. Let's see how they fare in their communities. So Kathy Blacksmith was in her 50s when interviewed. She reported her ex-partner for burning her house and filed for divorce from him. Her ex-partner had a criminal record as well. So this is her description of what happened after she reported her husband for burning her house. So instead of, her husband was arrested, but then released by the local police. She was arrested because her husband reported to the police that she had a long history of drug abuse. Luke Bell was in his 50s when interviewed. He molested his, biological daughter when she was 10 years old, and her two sons committed suicide because of this tragedy in the family. So Luke Bell actually was very resentful of the fact that his sons committed suicide to show support for his daughter. So there's a generational difference in attitude towards women victims. For male perpetrators who committed non-gender-based violence, such as theft, rural areas are more punitive. So this really shows that women are not as important as property, because crimes against women are not punished as much as crimes against property. And for women of color who committed crimes other than sexual or physical assaults, urban areas seems to be more hostile. Again, this really shows that women of color are not seen as capable. The second part is victimhood and reentry. And so victimhood of the respondents of crime or the larger society has great impact on respondents, as shown in the narratives. Stigma and trauma are two major themes. And then, the quantitative analysis also show that victimhood is associated with social network characteristics and pro-social attitude as well. I mean, I use that as a network measure. So the link between, victimhood, perpetration is well documented in the literature. So when women are victimized, they often blame themselves. Lauren Williams is a good example of that. She despised herself after she was molested by her uncle when she was 12 years old, and she had to use drugs to numb herself. And she was arrested for trespassing because she stole drugs from her grandparents' drugstore. So in a certain sense, her victimhood is the gateway to crime. And this path from trauma to crime is also found with adult women. And this is well documented in the literature. So it seems that trauma is related with the stigma these women perceived and was imposed onto them by the larger society. So in other words, when women cannot verify their identities, valued identities as family members, they're going to experience negative emotions, which lead to their crime. And the quantitative part really build on these qualitative findings, and I'm going to show you the sample descriptive statistics. As you can see, both identities of crime of victim are very low in Zillions. So there's a certain amount of stigma associated with this, probably. And table 2 shows the regression model on the identity of victim of crime. As you can see, pro-social attitude is associated with higher pro-social attitude is associated with lower Zillions of the identity of crime victim. And table 3 is the results for the identity of a victim as of this larger society. There's a very similar finding here. So the more pro-social people are, the less salient their victim identity is here, as you can see. So in conclusion, this studies really shows that rural areas tend to treat women more harshly. And the relationship between stigma and trauma is explored, but more needs to be done to have more in-depth understanding between the two. Thank you so much. I look forward to your feedback. This is very important to me. Have a good day. Goodbye.